Hello friends and adventurers, I'm Em, and today I would like to tell you about the history and origins of d20. Now, it is not a fully uncovered topic, but we'll go as deep as is currently possible. So d20 is a 20-sided die that is used alongside of other similarly multifaceted dice to play role-playing games. But in modern times, before the arrival of D&D and similar, they were used also, and still are, for mathematics and random number generation. Of course, some were also used for some other games. So how old would a completely modern looking and fully usable as such, and fully recognizable D20, how old would the oldest one that we have ever discovered, how old would it be? What do you think? This D20 that you are looking at right now, how old is it? This one comes from Egypt before the fall to the Romans. And yes, it's completely a modern D20 in every aspect. However, what it was used for at the time, it is not currently known. But it had some prospects of potentially being used for determining actual random outcomes of events, potentially even in legendary or mythic situations. How come? Well, fortune-telling through dice and similar was popular throughout the world in ancient times, and that's kind of one of the reasons why they're used in the way they are used in D&D and similar today. That's simulating random probabilities of fate for an event to succeed or fail and what happens afterwards. And such simulations might have been done at Tabletop even as far as Egypt. In this case, this was Ptolemaic Egypt. That was at the time when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and Alexandria was raised. Now, Alexander died soon afterwards, and some of his closest companions fought over inheritances far and wide. One of them became sort of a governor of this Egyptian province, and then later fought off the others to become the king of Egypt and to try to inherit ruling the local culture, but in fact keeping their own Macedonian and Greek culture that they imported all the way to Egypt. And do you know what is important about this? Well, we had Library of Alexandria under the rule of this person. This is when it was established and when it rose to its peak. This die is from there, and then maybe cut from the same stone at the same quarry. It could have been very well used within. Now, why do I say so? Well, you see, the way Library of Alexandria was built, you would think it was lost suddenly and nobody knows anything, but actually this is the most well-documented period of Egypt, of the ancient times, because there was lots of people that liked writing, and writing was well respected. That's why we had the library come about. So lots of rewritten stuff about the stuff that was written at the time still survived, even if the library didn't. But also something interesting, in fact everything about this is interesting, that you might have not known, even if you somewhat like to hear about history here and there. Firstly, the library didn't just go up in smoke the first time Alexandria was attacked. No, what happened is what kind of always happens. Corruption in the top of the government just led to government sidelining the library eventually and using it for, corruption purposes of putting their own people at the position of head librarian, which was previously, for a couple of centuries, a very respected position in the whole world, because this was the Academy of Sciences that the whole world respected. Well, the whole known world from that spot to the surroundings and such. So, previously though, a couple of these rulers did respect knowledge, and they imported lots of their culture and combined with the local culture to have as complete a library as possible. They wanted to have definitive source of knowledge for the world there. And Alexandria being a prosperous port at the time, a port that was very crucial, well, it had ability to sponsor its library heftily. So, now, we have somewhat well-documented period, and what do you think happened? We have a library that was built to have rooms where professors stayed and librarians. We had a big dining hall where the professors, librarians, and students would eat. We would have discussion halls and classrooms where teachings would happen. We would have potentially garden and surroundings, maybe even a small, well, I don't know how big or small, and it's not confirmed whether it was or not, but potentially a zoo even, and a library, of course, with all its scrolls and books stacked there to be available. Now, does this remind you already of something? Well, yes, the idea of how this library was built and for what it was meant to do survived very well, everywhere. This is how almost every modern school in the world is built now. So, surprisingly, anywhere you've been to school, you've felt how at least the architecture and intended purpose of Library of Alexandria was. The design got very famous and very copied and very used. And even at the original place, it was kind of used as an university. And so, you could possibly have a situation where we would have this die used in discussions you would find familiar in these situations in something that looked like a modern school. Now, interestingly enough, is how some things were lots more modern than people would think. For example, the funding of this becoming the center of knowledge, how was it used? Whilst it was used well. You see, there was free food and stay for these professors and librarians, and they were supposed to concentrate only on what they wanted to do with science and art. Further, budget was allotted to go and buy and collect books, and emphasis was put on getting as original a copy as possible so that translators don't play around with it, as in when games are getting localized. Some things are never changing, are they? So where would these people go around to spend lots of money to buy books? Well, they would go to book fairs, surprisingly enough. So, not what you imagined, is it? Book fairs, university, high-level discussion of pretty modern science. For example, one of the head librarians was a person who first calculated how big and round the Earth was. And they say he hit it within several hundred kilometers pretty well. Given resources at the time, incredibly amazing, don't you think? Oh, by the way, and the library was also a museum because it was dedicated to the muses. That's why museums are called that today. And it was called that pretty much then as well. As for Romans, that came afterwards, they loved gambling and used lots of standard D6s and so on. And they did so much so that probably we had first somewhat modern casinos and stuff like that until gambling got banned because they gambled so much that Rome banned gambling at one point. And many such things that we would find incredibly familiar. So much so that if you ran this as a DM, people would accuse you that you're extremely modernizing ancient times to no real reason. So now, with that knowledge, you're armed in knowing how actually old some origins of what we're doing today are. Hopefully, if we do well, if we try our best, we can still make our predecessors proud with our actions by continuing to research philosophies about events in life and to create better worlds through speculation and simulation. Our D20 is truly an ancient thing. So, adventurer, if you thought this was unique, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here next or perhaps even every week, because I have so much more content for you. I make it myself. So, welcome to the DM table.